Here's your reminder that the Democratic Party will go down with this ship and allow authoritarianism as long as they convince you that the ship is still working. What was that ship collision? Was it South Korea? Where they told all the kids who were there that the ship was okay, that they can remain in their rooms. Over 100 kids were unalived in this shipwreck because they told them to stay inside. And this is how I see this wreckage of our constitutional crises, where Democrats are like, it's okay. Elon Musk isn't a Yahtzee. Yes, he is. Well, he's official. The POTUS put him in there. This is the thing, because they think that old rules are still there, that honor and tradition are still there. They don't uphold the Constitution. They believe that the Constitution is optional. It makes me rage because Jamie Raskin is a literal constitutional attorney, but I'm not surprised because attorneys are limited by what? Legal formalism. That is that if the rule of law is reshaped, then they adapt to that new rule of law by saying, well, technically, he positioned a law through official means that is now legal, so now I have to adapt to this new law, even if that is not ethical, right? Which is funny because coming from an international law background, I know that American justice is that you as a legal professional have an obedience to superior orders. A lot of times this is like, say, POTUS, this is, say, the judges, right? But in general, under Article 6 Supremacy Clause, it should be Article 6 Section 3, right? But a lot of legal formalism here in the United States restricts that to only say that the federal government is basically superior than state rights. However, through an international law mechanism, what the United States government has positioned is that Article 6 Supremacy Clause actually means that the Constitution cannot be overruled by anyone, including Congress, including the courts, including the executive, and yet we're here. And this is because I tell you, Democrats do not maximize on constitutional powers. Republicans do, which is why they're so successful. They maximize on constitutional ambiguity. You see, Democrats should be maximizing on constitutional authority, but they don't because they're scared. Because what? They like bipartisanship. You know what? They don't want to be like the Republicans. And look at us. Look at us. They would rather not admit that we're lost rather than send us the right way. And this is why, if you call, you may find people who are condescending to you, saying that you're overreacting because they're positioning things as they should be within the political formalism, which is that they don't detour away from how they were taught, from how they were trained. They say, hey, what Cybertruck Body is doing is legal because POTUS put him there, when in fact the courts are positioning that what he's doing is illegal. And this is why I say they won't be helpful, because they'll rather uphold the status quo and go down with the ship than to challenge it. And I need y'all to understand that no matter how much we annoy them, they're not going to be the ones to save us. They're not going to be the ones to save us, because in admitting that this isn't working, it's admitting that we need a new system, and they'll rather go down with this system that isn't working than to be part of a new system. Why? Because the top not respecting rule of law is authoritarianism, but the bottom understanding that because the top doesn't respect rule of law, then the rule of law doesn't apply to the bottom. That's anarchy. So they'll rather just uphold the anarchy of the top than the anarchy at the bottom. This is why I criticize legal formalism. So people who look at, let's say, the memo about the unalive penalty and say, hey, it only applies to immigrants who commit capital crimes. Yes, but do you ask yourself, why is this needed? Why is this needed? Why is it needed that they have to literally categorize a certain population rather than generally saying that this is going to occur if you commit capital crimes? You see, they don't actually think about that because that's not their job to think about that. They're like, this is nothing. It reiterates things that we already knew. Then why? It's the same people who tell me, don't worry, when it comes to HR 22, it just has to match your name. If it was only that easy, it took me a year to get a real ID. Do you know why? Because whenever I went to the DMV, the person there didn't actually know what was required and would ask me for things that I didn't actually have or need. So I would just leave and then return. And eventually one day, after 3 hours of her calling everyone under the sun, I finally got a real ID. When in fact, I had all the documentation that was needed in order to do that. They just made up shit that they felt they needed and that I didn't have to make it difficult. Can you imagine that when it comes to voting? And that's the thing, it's not just going to be like transgender Americans who will be caught up. It's going to be married women as well. And even those Democrats who tell you that he isn't a Yahtzee will be the ones who say, well, this law was passed by POTUS or passed by a entity that is qualified to do so under this government, so what can I do? And that is the inaction, that is the apathy that we ourselves should be angry at. It makes me very disappointed because I don't see myself as being smarter than people in DC. Yet why does it seem like there's smarter people on the outside than there are on the inside? And I think because the ones on the inside are compromised. Because of this, they're not gonna save us, because saving us would mean removing their own job. Why? Because this Congress doesn't work how it's positioned. This government doesn't work how it's positioned. And they'll rather go down with the ship than help fix it. Like, we be seeing the Democratic Party as our friends, but they're actually a branch of government. And they'll rather admit that we're delusional and there's no fire to the palace than to admit that they have to do some work and put out the fire. In this reality, I would position that the Democratic Party is worse than the Republican Party because we had perceived them to be on our side, yet they're not. Yes, they refuse to actually do anything to protect us. The part I hate the most about that is that people believe them. People believe them, and people are like, hey, the Democratic Party will save us. Hey, the Democratic Party is doing a lot right now. They're not. And anyone who believes that they're doing enough just doesn't know about politics, or just woke up to politics and thinks that high school civics was enough for them to understand what's going on. It's unfortunate because as a response, people are unprepared. People are unprepared and don't actually know how serious this is. But the reality is that while we have opportunities or freedom now to resist, we won't for years. Because people will be propagandized, the loyalists will be inserted into our government, and we won't get rid of them. Even if we were successful of having a fair election, they won't get rid of them. Because that would require mass purge. Democrats don't do that. We literally put in Merrick Garland, and look what that got us. At this point, let it all burn.